Oh, camera's already on. Hello, Science 8. Welcome back to class. The second half of the first half of the astronomy. Lesson 3 of Chapter 11, Planets and Their Moons. Let's begin. Hopefully you know that we are Earth. We are this planet right here. The four inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, are all rocky and have craters caused by meteors on their surface. That's something that we all have in common. When I say we all, I mean these four planets specifically. The other planets don't have those things. Mercury, its closest planet to the Sun, moves around the Sun in a highly elliptical orbit. If you remember from last week, elliptical means oval shaped, so really oval. It's not like a circle. It doesn't have any moons and it has almost no atmosphere, which means temperatures go back and forth really wildly. Extremely hot during the daytime and then really cold during the nighttime. That's because atmospheres hold on to heat, and without an atmosphere you can't hold on to the heat, so as soon as the sunlight's not hitting you anymore, it drops down to negative 183 degrees Celsius. Just like that almost. After Mercury, we got Venus, second planet from the Sun. Very close to Earth in size and mass like that. Not really what it looks like, but at least how big it is. Its atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide, which you guys might know is called a greenhouse gas. It absorbs infrared radiation emitted by the planet's surface and traps heat in the atmosphere. So the sunlight gets in there and the planet itself releases heat, and the carbon dioxide likes to hold onto it. And because of that, Venus is incredibly hot. It can melt. It rains metal in some places. It's pretty crazy. And as we said last time, Venus's day is longer than its year. It takes longer for Venus to spin around once than it does to go around the Sun once, which is pretty interesting. This is an actual photograph of what Venus looks like. I believe this is a Russian probe that landed. Took a couple pictures and then it stopped working because the atmosphere was too hot and too pressurized for the poor little robot to function much longer. But I just think that's crazy. Seeing pictures of other planets is like mind-blowing. As far as we know, Earth is the only planet with life. You guys know a lot about Earth because we live here, and I mean, you study Earth science in 7th grade or 6th grade? 6th grade. So you guys know a lot about Earth. Our friend Mars, fourth planet from the Sun, has a very thin atmosphere. It does have one, but it's very thin. And it has two moons called Phobos and Deimos. And on one of those moons, the gravity is actually so weak that if you could run on it and jump, you could actually escape into orbit. So like instead of using a rocket, you could just use your legs, which is pretty crazy. Not that big, not that massive of a moon. We have landed on Mars and we have found evidence of water, not liquid water, but ice water, like ice caps right here. And also in some places, if we dig a little bit, we find ice underground. The problem is water doesn't like to exist as a liquid on Mars. It's either a solid or a gas. There's not really enough, the conditions aren't right for water to exist as a liquid on the surface. Although there's evidence that there was at one point. We also have not found life on Mars, although everybody really wishes there was. No evidence yet. Something cool about Mars, if you look on the bottom left, you see a picture of the United States, and this right here is a canyon. So there is a canyon on Mars that is the size of the United States, which is intense. The Grand Canyon would only be like maybe this little dark spot, and this canyon runs the size of the United States. That is a gigantic canyon. Also, the largest mountain on the solar system is on Mars, Olympus Mons over here. In the background you see the country of France, and in the foreground you see Olympus Mons, which means this mountain on Mars is as big as the country of France. Our mountains are nothing compared to this mountain. This mountain is the size of one of our countries, so that's crazy. Mars has some pretty interesting things about it. It's actually also a lot smaller than people realize if you go back to here. Oops. You see Mercury, Venus, Earth. Venus and Earth are pretty similar in size, but Mars is actually a lot smaller. A lot of people think Mars is about the same size as Earth, but that is not true. Mars is a lot smaller. So those are the 4 inner planets. Remember, they are rocky, and they have craters on them. But there are the outer planets. Oh my gosh, excuse me. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. They're called the outer planets because why? They're farther out there. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, has a bunch of moons, and in its composition, not in its size, but in what it's made of, it resembles a small star. So it's mostly hydrogen and helium. Most stars are hydrogen and helium. So Jupiter composition is similar to a star. Not that it is close to a star. Okay. It has a giant red spot that's a storm. It's been there for hundreds of years. Probably be there for a lot longer. Saturn is also a gas giant made of mostly hydrogen and helium. Saturn has all those crazy rings. Actually, the most complex. All the outer planets have rings, but Saturn's is the only one that it's known for. Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune all have rings as well, but they're just not as neat as Saturn's. And Saturn has a bunch of moons as well. Here we see Jupiter with the great red spot. Pretty cool stuff. The white parts are actually clouds, and the dark spots are actually you being able to see farther into the planet. And here we see Saturn. If you look, this actually looks like a hexagon. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides right there. Saturn also gets storms like this, but they're not as pronounced, and they don't last nearly as long as they do on Jupiter. The 2 farther outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, are interesting. I think they're more interesting how we found them. Uranus was kind of accidentally found by a telescope, and its axis of rotation is nearly parallel, which means all the planets are kind of rotating like this, but Uranus, instead of rotating like this, actually rotates like this, which is really unusual for planets. It's the only one that's doing it in our solar system. But a long time ago, a guy named Herschel was looking at stars, and he noticed this one star acting really weird, so he kept tracking it and tracking it until eventually he realized this isn't a star at all. This is another planet. This is Uranus. So they found Uranus. Haha, it's funny. And then next up is Neptune. Neptune was actually predicted by a bunch of nerds doing math. They were looking at Uranus and all the other planets, and they were saying, something's not right. The planets kind of slow down sometimes and kind of speed up sometimes. And they did a bunch of math, and they realized that there should be another planet, and it's going to be right there. And what do you know? They predicted it with math, and they were able to find it by that. So they couldn't see it with the... They didn't just see it with a telescope on accident like they did Uranus. They had to predict where it was, and then they found it. Pluto was discovered in 1930. It is not a planet. Pluto has a moon named Charon. It's either Charon or Charon. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong either way. But here's Uranus and Neptune. This is pretty featureless, and it's almost one solid color. This is also pretty featureless, but at least you can see a little bit of clouds and a little bit of dark spots. But yeah, those are those planets. This is Pluto, and this is its moon. This is one of the reasons why we don't consider it a planet. It's because it can almost fit into the United States. Both of them can almost fit in the United States. Obviously, it's a lot larger. The United States is flat, and this is round, but it's still not that big. Wow, that's it, really? Okay. Watch the next video for lesson 4.